I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israelis brave the rain to celebrate the new year. Netanyahu's Likud party votes to annex Jewish homes in the West Bank. And we've got the scoop on all the awesome Israeli TV, movies, and concerts heading your way in 2018. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Even though Israelis have their very own Hebrew New Year on Rosh Hashanah, New Year's Eve parties around the country managed to say goodbye to 2017 with a bang. Here in Israel, the occasion is known as Sylvester in memory of the death of Pope Sylvester on December 31st. And despite bitter cold weather and rain, I think it's safe to say this year's Sylvester festivities were a success. Security was boosted throughout the country ahead of the evening of parties, with extra cops and security officers placed throughout major cities. New Year's Eve celebrations marking the end of the civil year have become increasingly popular in Israel recently. This year, people and cab drivers from all over the country flocked to Tel Aviv, where streets, bars, clubs, and pubs kicked off the new year in style. As always, some people partied a little too hard. The Magen David Adom ambulance service says they treated 51 cases of alcohol poisoning this Sylvester. Unfortunately for Israelis, everyone still has to get up for work the next day. Yep, January 1st is just a normal business day here in the Holy Land. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party has just approved a bombshell new resolution. Though it isn't legally binding, the vote calls on the government to officially annex Jewish communities in the West Bank as Israeli territory.
ואנחנו, כשנחיל את הזכות הזו ונחיל את הריבונות, לא נעשה זאת בזכות הכוח שלנו. אנחנו נעשה זאת, כפי שאתם אומרים בצדק, בכוח הזכות ההיסטורית, הזכות הדתית, הזכות המוסרית, הזכות התנ"כית, והגיע הזמן לממש את הזכות הזו.
This is a controversial decision because most countries see these territories as illegally seized from Palestinian landowners. On top of that, international law makes it illegal in most cases to annex land captured from another country in war. But Israel has often moved full steam ahead with its settlement project, even placing settlers in the West Bank under Israeli civilian law because of historical, biblical, and security reasons. Ironically, the Knesset just approved a cooperation with the European Union that seems to work against the settlements. The plan greenlights Israeli participation in a series of projects, one that funnels millions of euros from Europe towards Israeli projects. But the agreement specifically doesn't include any Israeli projects in the West Bank, which has led many to accuse the government of actually agreeing to participate in the boycott against its own settlements. Jewish leaders from West Bank settlements are outraged over the government's consent, which will fund Palestinian projects in the West Bank, but no Israeli projects in the same area. Only one Israeli minister filed an objection to the deal, which has now been fully approved. A Palestinian teenager has become the center of a fierce debate. Last month, a 16-year-old girl and her cousin were filmed slapping IDF soldiers in the West Bank in an act that some say was meant to provoke the soldiers into a violent response. Both the girl and her cousin have been arrested and now face criminal charges from an Israeli military court. Many Israelis praise the soldiers depicted in the video for not fighting back, and the army commended them for acting professionally at the time. 16-year-old Ached Tamimi and her cousin were arrested in their homes in the middle of the night and held in custody as police officials prepared to charge them with various counts of aggravated assault and insulting soldiers. For Palestinians, however, the defiance of these young unarmed women in the face of fully armed Israeli soldiers has become an icon for resistance against Israel.
كل هذا الحكي يعني تتوج أخيرا في المشهد اللي شاهده الجميع، واللي يعني أخذ هذا الصدى لبعدين. البعد الأول البروباغندا اللي استخدمتها العقلية الصهيونية الإسرائيلية في محاولة لإظهار جنديها كوجه إنساني، وأنه لم يكن عليه درجة فعل.
Tamimi actually testified in court that an hour prior to the video, she witnessed an IDF soldier shoot her boy cousin in the head with a rubber bullet outside of her home. When she saw this soldier again, she claimed she could not keep quiet and chose to respond as she did. Pictures of the cousin do show him badly injured in the face, and he was also apparently hospitalized in a coma at the time of the attack. The IDF claims that Palestinians were reportedly throwing stones at soldiers around the time of the incident. Well, many see serving in Israel's military as not only a necessary reality, but also a tremendous honor. Almost all Israeli boys and girls are required to draft at age 18, but now a group of Israeli teenagers are facing possible jail time for refusing to enlist, and they've written the government an open letter explaining why. ILTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with the story. Now, Brett, this issue has fiercely split the country. Now, why are they refusing to draft?
Thanks, Natasha. Well, these are 63 high school-age kids from all over the country who consider themselves conscientious objectors. And that means they don't want to serve in the armed forces based on moral reasons or objections. But their letter actually goes a step further because it specifically says they're refusing the draft because of Israeli policy in the West Bank, which they accuse of violating human rights of Palestinians both in and outside of Palestinian territory.
Now, there have, of course, been many famous cases of teens who refused to draft into the Army without religious or medical excuses. I understand the Army doesn't accept moral arguments as a legal excuse from Army service, correct?
Correct. No, and that's why these kids could actually be facing real consequences for this, one or even several jail sentences if they refuse to show up for their draft. Now, on one hand, even if you're against Israeli policy in the Palestinian territories, there's an argument to be made that the IDF does tons of amazing work inside the country and even incredible work abroad. So just because you don't draft doesn't mean you're necessarily directly servicing the occupation, as some say. Now, on the other hand, what these teens argue, the spiral of violence has lasted 50 years now, which is why they say it's time to withdraw once and for all and refuse to take up the gun, as you'll see in the rest of my report. 63 teenagers have signed the open letter addressed to Prime Minister Netanyahu and top IDF brass, summoning high schoolers around the country to refuse the draft. This letter condemns the conduct of Israel's defense forces, accusing the army of implementing a, quote, racist government policy that violates human rights, end quote. The teens say they will continue to resist their conscription until Israel fully withdraws from the occupied territories. While conscientious objectors and objections to the draft are nothing new, the topic is always controversial. Some are praising these teens for standing up for their beliefs, especially in the face of likely repeated jail sentences, but others are outraged, some even demanding that the teens' voting rights as citizens be fully revoked. Israel's deputy defense minister has slammed their words as, quote, hypocritical and contemptible, end quote. But these 63 teens argue that removing themselves from the army is the only way to end the cycle of violence and conflict that has engulfed the region. Clearly, this is a debate that will continue to cycle as well for quite some time.
It's already not easy to run and finance a small business, but for women living in the periphery of Israel, it can be even harder. Joining us now in the studio is Yael Ovadia, the CEO of Yozmot Atid, an organization that is helping women set up their own businesses throughout the country. Thank you so much for joining us. So this is very interesting. You focus on two issues, women finding work and the periphery of Israel. Now, what are the challenges that women face when it comes to opening small businesses here in Israel? And obviously, what makes it harder to open those businesses in the periphery and not the center of the country?
Yozmot Atid was established in order to reduce the gap in the Israeli society by empowering the women that have maybe a fear and they don't really know how to do it.
Right.
And we realized that if we provide them a full package of services, of support that include training and personal mentoring and loans and many benefits and networking, it can help them, and all of this with no charge.
Right,
it can
and
help
so you're
them.
talking about a lack of education that exists, and that gap is obviously there, and especially when it's not in the center where there's more access to courses on these things. Okay, so interesting. So your organization works all over the country, and
Yes.
where specifically?
It's all over the country, but it's specifically underprivileged women, because we know that if you are in the periphery and also the social periphery, you don't have maybe the same opportunity that that the other women had, and when we meet them and believe in them and believe at their idea, so we can realize their dream.
How did you come up with the idea to focus on this issue? You know, it's a very specific target that you have.
Because we believe that women that will establish her own business can have more than regular work, because she can she feel proud. She feel proud of herself, that she is standing by herself. She can feel proud to say to her children, and everyone can have this opportunity to do it.
Absolutely. Are there any specific you know, small businesses that stand out that have come from your organization?
Of course, many of them. We have, like you see in the picture, we have carpenter, we have photography, we have cosmetics, we have catering, kindergarten.
So it's really a whole range. I mean, it's basically you guys hear the idea and then you kind of help realize it.
We believe in them. If she has the idea, so we are going with her idea, but she have to take the responsibility of the process to be devoted on this and then to come. All
right. Well, Yael, thank you so much for joining us. Incredible project that you guys have going for you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
All right, Moshe Holtzberg was just 3 years old when his parents were tragically killed by a terrorist in the Nariman Chabad house in India. Moshe's nanny miraculously saved him and brought him to Israel. Moshe is now 11 years old, and get this, he's all set to return to the Chabad house, joining Prime Minister Netanyahu on his official state visit to India later this month. Talk about a VIP trip. Moshe was actually invited back to India by India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi when Modi visited Israel last summer. That was a monumental occasion marking the first time an Indian Prime Minister ever visited the country. The invitation to young Moshe clearly touched Prime Minister Netanyahu, who immediately invited the boy to join him on his next visit to India. Netanyahu's office has confirmed that Moshe is booked for Netanyahu's visit set for January 14th. The death of Moshe's parents that day in Mumbai was just one of many, many horrific terror attacks that ravaged India in 2008. 4 other Jews were killed in the Chabad house attack along with Moshe's parents, and 166 people were murdered in total. But despite these tragic memories, Moshe says his dream is still to return to India for good someday and work in the exact same Chabad house that his parents once called home. Beautiful. All right, a custom-designed 1939 Mercedes Benz has just been put up for auction. It's being described as the most historically significant automobile ever offered for public sale. That might very well be the case because this car belonged to none other than Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler. This is, in fact, the very Mercedes-Benz 770K that Hitler ordered, based on the dictator's detailed list of requirements. The car's historical importance and symbolism is what makes this vehicle such a legendary machine. That's why 10% of the sale will be used to fund Holocaust education and awareness. Hitler originally used a vehicle which is outfitted with bullet-resistant glass and armor plating to chauffeur visiting heads of states to Nazi Germany. It was seized by American troops at the end of World War II, and then was used by veterans organizations in parades. The seller hopes the car will now be sold and put into a public museum exhibition so that it will continue to educate the masses. Ironically, Germany's current foreign minister has just come under fire for controversial remarks, labeling the state of Israel as an apartheid state. Many critics say these words undermine the founding of the Jewish state as the only Middle East democracy, as well as the horrific fate of the Jews in World War II. Less than 20% of the world's Jews are Sephardic in origin, meaning of Spanish and Portuguese Jewish descent. So after an inquisition and hundreds of years, it's no wonder that certain Sephardic traditions and even languages like Ladino have been lost to time. Well, now at least one Sephardic rabbi is doing everything that he can to bring back some of this lost history, and he's doing it through music. Let's take a look. La vida do por el raquí. No puedo yo dejarlo, de bebé nunca me hartí, de tanto amarlo, mi alma se escurece. Joining me now is Ladino expert and singer in Los Serenos, Sefarad, Rabbi Simon Ben Zaken. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting us to.
Well, so this is very interesting. How and why did you begin these efforts to revitalize Ladino music?
Well, I had many questions which were never answered. Is the fact that, for example, if you want to know about what happened to the people in Europe, our brethren, the Jewish people, in the Shoah, in the Holocaust, it's very easy. You don't have to go to any archive, to any museum. They wrote everything. Every family went through that. Yeah. They wrote. And even if those who didn't want, their children did. So you have all that fact in there.
In the songs and the stories.
In the story. But with us, we never find anything about, I mean, very, very little about Gerush Sefarad, the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. Yeah. And I thought, why not? It's almost like it's a bushai, it's a shame. They didn't care about their history, but it's not. The fact is that they could never criticize Spain, because Spain was still an incredible empire. And many who criticized, they ended up in the, in auto da fe, burned to the stake. And so therefore, what I believe, and when I'm finding out of those romances stories, that they are not romances, they are dialogue between not as a woman and a man, or a man and a woman, but between the Jews of Spain and Spain. And they were criticizing in an indirect way.
Through the music.
Through the music.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, and so I understand that, I mean, this is just, it's very interesting to me that you're performing yourself. What has been the reactions to you bringing back this music? I mean, people don't even know Ladino is a language anymore.
But what happened is I write all the lyrics. What happened, I write from the songs, whatever I understand, interpreted. I write the lyrics, and there a lot speaks about pining from Jerusalem, and the Jews realizing that Spain wasn't their place, should have been Jerusalem. And therefore we make it into rap music, which is what today everybody likes to listen to.
So people nowadays can kind of have a mix of both of those cultures. All right, so for those of our viewers who want to hear more of your music and learn more about what you're doing, where can they find it?
Oh, they find it in Google, in iTunes, so many places. This is
Okay, Los Serenos, Sefarad. All right, very cool. Thank you so much for joining us. This is very interesting to hear about.
Nice to be here.
Rabbi, have a wonderful trip to Israel.
Thank you.
Ads for the upcoming season of the hit series Fauda have been quickening some pulses here in Israel. And no, it's not because they're excited for new episodes. It's because the creative ad campaign features billboards written completely in Arabic, warning people that the chaos is about to begin, without any apparent mention of the TV series. The sparse white text on black, written without Hebrew or English translation, first started appearing around major cities a few weeks ago. Israelis were a little bit puzzled at first, but when they started translating the billboards, which read "Prepare yourselves" and "On its way to you," a mild hysteria ensued. The hit show Fauda is a thriller about Israeli undercover forces and the Palestinians they hunt. But without any obvious connection to the series, the ominous text led some to worry that these threats were actually real. This panic created the exact buzz advertisers were probably hoping for, and fans were both relieved and impressed when they finally understood these were actually covert ads for their favorite TV series. Not everyone was thrilled, though. Two mayors from Israeli cities are demanding the billboards be pulled down, and some are outraged that the stunt brings the network dollars at the expense of the public. Either way, in this case, even bad press is good press, and expectations continue to soar for the newest season of everyone's favorite Israeli series. Well, speaking of awesome Israeli TV and stories, there's a lot more where that came from in 2018. The new year promises loads of films, documentaries, and series from right here in the Holy Land, and a whole new lineup of amazing concerts to look forward to. Check it out. Looks like Hollywood's finally embracing thrillers and stories based on the IDF. Captain America himself, Chris Evans, just wrapped filming on the Red Sea diving resort, playing the Israeli spy who helped oversee the airlift of Ethiopian Jews to Israel. There's also the Hollywood retelling of 7 Days in Entebbe, which reenacts Operation Thunderbolt. You'll spot a few Hollywood stars playing real-life Israeli leaders in that one. Operation Finale is already shaping up to be an awards contender for next year. The film stars Oscar winner Sir Ben Kingsley as Nazi criminal Adolf Eichmann, and Oscar Isaac as a Mossad agent who ultimately tracks him down in Argentina. We've also got not one but two projects about an Egyptian billionaire who spied for the Mossad. One's a documentary, and the other is getting the Netflix treatment as an original drama. Next summer, tons of awesome bands are headed to play in the Holy Land as well. Rumors are still swirling that Coldplay might finally play this year, but if not, there's still Ringo Starr, Alt-J, Foreigner, The Scorpions, and Ozzy Osbourne's farewell tour to look forward to. Joining us now in the studio are two nice Jewish boys, Noel Menninger and Eitan Weinstein. And no, I'm not joking with that introduction. These two men actually have a very special podcast called Two Nice Jewish Boys, and we're about to find out if they're actually that nice. Guys, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a bit misleading.
I hope that you live up to this title that you guys have going for yourselves. So tell us about this podcast. How did you come up with this name?
Well, I don't really know. I mean, it just came to me, at night.
It's the first association when you think of us.
Right.
Yeah,
We're
right.
Just two,
the first association, absolutely. Yeah,
the first association for anybody, if you ask anybody.
So tell us a little bit about what your podcast covers.
So it's a podcast in English about life in Israel, and we try to bring every week the most interesting people who live here and to converse with them about their lives, about their achievements.
Entertainers, journalists, politicians. We've had members of Knesset.
Yeah, so I checked out the podcast myself a little bit, and you really do have a range from everyone from the creator of Fauda to
Topol.
To Michael Oren. So
Michael Oren.
Who, I mean, this is kind of a hard question probably for you guys since you talk to so many different people, but what podcast stood out to you the most in 2017?
I think for me, one of my personal favorites was Tamara Baraz, who's a journalist.
Okay.
And she came on the show to tell us about how she was in Iraq, locked up in an Iraqi prison and accused of being a Mossad spy. And that was just a fascinating story for her to tell us about how she goes to all these amazing places and just puts herself in the way of danger and at risk, and then brings back these amazing stories. But that particular one, she went to Iraq to do a piece on women prostitution in Iraq.
Right. So this podcast is clearly for people of all backgrounds, and it's in English, which is unique because obviously most of the news that's coming out on the radio and podcasts here in Israel is in Hebrew, right? So what is next for your podcast? Do you have any other podcasts?
So we just started a new podcast. It's called the Melting Podcast.
Okay.
We're doing it with Khan, and it's about Aliyah, and it's meant for Olim.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We have Olim every week, guests and musicians, and it's
from all over the world.
Yeah.
Very
cool. Also looking in 2018 to hopefully find some sponsors. Because right now we're doing this kind of on the side.
So this is a side job, right? You guys both have day jobs, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is just something that you do for fun. No big deal.
Right, exactly.
Very cool. All right, well, listen, I'm going to start listening to this podcast. Everybody else should also be listening. And obviously, if you're interested in financially helping out these guys so they can keep on doing it.
And the website is www.2njb.com.
2NJB, two nice Jewish boys, my friends, to keep that in mind. All right, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we're still crossing our fingers that Israeli superstar Gal Gadot scores an Oscar nomination for her incredible performance as Wonder Woman this year. Gadot became an instant household name when the film opened to rave success this summer. The film broke box office records, but get this, now Forbes has just named Gal Gadot as the highest grossing actress of the year. This news comes as no shock to us. Wonder Woman was not only loved by critics for reigniting the superhero formula, it's also shattered both the glass ceiling and box office records. Wonder Woman is currently the highest-grossing live-action film ever directed by a woman and one of the top-grossing films of the year. Gadot actually donned the Wonder Woman costume twice this year, reprising the role in Justice League. Compared to men, Gadot is actually the number 3 overall top-grossing actor this year, behind Vin Diesel and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Even though the Golden Globes snubbed Gadot a nomination, clearly they couldn't overlook Gadot's massive contribution to the box office. She is now set to present a Golden Globe Award at this year's ceremony, but maybe by this time next year she'll be on the receiving end. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. It's raining like crazy in Israel today, so today's word is Geshem, which means rain in Hebrew. Winter in Israel usually means Geshem, not that much of it, but Geshem nonetheless. Sadly, this year the country has received even less geshem than the annual average, which is pretty bad since Israel has been going through a drought for the last 4 years. So even though the geshem is causing even more traffic than usual and essentially shutting down the country, we're still happy. And on that note, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. The new year has started with lots of rain, and it looks like that's going to be continuing into Tuesday. Tomorrow's high will be 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 17 degrees Celsius. The rain should clear out by Wednesday, but the clouds will remain, although the temperature should rise by 1 degree to a pleasant 65 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.47 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.